Alright guys, so in this video we're going to talk about how to overcome anxiety. And when it comes to anxiety is it's mainly just a fear. It's a fear of the future, it's a fear of the unknown. Sometimes it can kind of overtake us in the sense of, you could just be somewhere outside at a stoplight and just feel overwhelmed with the situation. So it can be triggered from many different sources. But typically, when I think of anxiety, I think of a worry, and when it becomes a worry that affects the way that we deal with others, it may affect our schoolwork. It just affects our interactions. Then they typically can kind of attach that word disorder to it, and so it becomes anxiety disorder. So, in this video, we're going to talk about really the three ways that you can initially just start to learn how to adapt to it, to kind of master the anxiety per se, or really three skills that you can kind of build upon to hopefully reduce those symptoms and really kind of get your life back and not let it overtake you. The first step is going to be to learn to not react, and this is kind of a tough one because so many times we feel that we have to do something on so many levels. I don't care whether it's relationships or someone will say something to you and such, but a lot of times we feel like we just have to react and do something to the situation. But what I would say is get in the habit of just taking a step back and and again understanding first of all here's this emotion that I'm having. Try to think of perhaps where it originally comes from. It may not be the situation at hand. Usually when someone becomes overwhelmed with something, it's usually the current state is just a trigger of something that's occurred in the past. So the first step is going to be to not react, to not just jump up and run and do something or make a decision. And I think that's where I see people kind of, it just makes things worse. It kind of perpetuates the situation and ultimately, doesn't help the outcome. Because I think if you can learn to not to react to the situation, it's going to help you with steps 2 and 3, which is where you can start implementing the change. So again, rule number 1 or step number 1 is just learn to not react. Kind of be there in that moment. Understand what feeling that you're having with this, and it may be overwhelming. But just don't put yourself in a worse situation by making a decision, especially when you're in a difficult frame of mind. So again, step number 1 is just learn to not to react. Now, step number 2 is to assess the situation, to say, what is under my control and what is not. And that's a real important step, because so many times in life and situations, and it doesn't matter whether it's in relationships, again, within jobs, the weather, you have to assess the situation that's affecting you and really kind of, determine whether this situation is it something that I control or is it something that's out of my control. Because if it's something that's within my control, then I own it. It's mine, for better for worse. It's on me. But if it's something that I don't control, or not part of me, then I discard it. You learn to not take on things that are outside of your control, because it's going to make the situation obviously 10 times worse. Several situations of my own that come up. Most recently, there was a situation, even like in the work environment. There was a person that said, "Hey, I think did you get upset with this one person at work or something like that?" And this came through a text. And the old me from years ago might have said, "What happened? What was your understanding of it, or whatnot?" But on this one, it was like my response was, that's their drama. That's something. If they have an issue, they should come to me. But I'm not gonna react to someone else's thoughts or feelings that may or might not even be true. So again, I implemented step number 1 is I'm not going to overreact to it, and then 2, assess is that something that I control or is that someone else's behaviors? And because I can't control somebody else's behaviors, and their thoughts, feelings, and emotions are on them. And another situation to where I implemented that in my life in a very stressful situation. Was going, is when you apply for residency, and this is one of those situations to where you do the best you can with what you got, with where you're at, and you have these plans in place, and then you implement the plan. And again, I mentioned this in other videos, is being an IMG student and applying for the match, it's very difficult, and you don't know whether you're going to get interviews. And I had a plan in place that I was going to do this. I'm going to email the directors on Christmas Day, and they're going to be up because they're A-type personalities, and I'm going to only send emails to certain programs, and it's just all going to work out. And so I did that, and then I removed myself emotionally from that situation. Went on a very kind of a holiday per se. It was Christmas and New Year's and stuff like that, and I detached myself from the outcome, to an extent. And what that did is, I could have sat there and worried and sent follow-up emails and just kind of been this nervous Nelly of pure anxiety throughout the situation. But I trusted the process, and so. I say when you're going through a difficult time, it doesn't matter whether it's in a relationship or work environment or applying for a job or whatnot, is, you have a plan in place, okay? You implement the plan, and then you just kind of remove yourself from that outcome, and I think that'll kind of detach you, and it helps you pick apart, again, what part of this is under my control? Well, the planning part, the preparation part is, but sometimes the outcome and the behavior of others isn't. And as quickly or as early in life as that we can really understand that, I think you're gonna improve in so many areas. And that piece of anxiety just kind of it really reduces itself. It takes care of itself on its own for the most part. So I'm not saying that anxiety doesn't exist or there's a sense of worry, but it just gets to the point where it doesn't overtake you. So again, step number 2, decipher what you do control and what you don't. What you do control, you own it, and what you don't, you discard it. And the third tip is, it's a absolute belief that, everything that occurs in situations and relationships and stuff, or work, is that it's just readjusting you to actually closer in alignment with your true purpose, your true meaning. In this world, as there was a book that I read way back, and it just made so much sense to me. It was by Edward Bach, or Bach is how some people pronounce it. He was a Bach flower guy. But anyways, it says when your soul is in alignment with your personality, or personality is in alignment with your soul. But mainly it just says, if you're doing what you're meant to do, life kind of flows. The illnesses kind of subside per se, and that was his theory on it, and I just really liked it and enjoyed it. So this third step is to say, no matter the outcome, it may not be what you had wanted, but you have to have that belief that the situation that is or has come to be is just really there to realign you with where you're meant to be headed. So some examples of that for me was, before I got into medicine, I was a school teacher, and a lot of times when you're a school teacher, especially if you're a male school teacher, you start planning to get into administration. And I tell the story before, but I was trying to get into administration, so I had my first real job to be an assistant principal, and that was going to be my thing. I'm going to be a teacher and an assistant principal, then I'll become a principal, and I'll just move up that ladder, and I was good at it. I was good at it because I worked hard, and I cared. And so what did I do? The weekend before the interview, I said, man, I'm going to visualize this thing into existence. I'm going to go and drive. I'm going to sit in that assistant principal parking spot with the sign that's there already. So it was the weekend, so nobody was there. I sat there, kind of visualized it. I had all my my sayings and what I would say in certain scenarios during the interview, and I'd always interviewed well, throughout my career per se. So I was confident going in the door. I was like, this job's mine for the taking. And sure enough, the interview was just horrible per se. They asked me the same question twice, and I knew in my mind, like, well, I'm not giving the answer that they want. So long story short, I didn't get that position, and And I could have sat there, pointed fingers, saying, I'm the most well-qualified person for this, and such. But I took it as, you know what, some other stressors were going on in the world for me at that time, and relationships and such. And I just took it as a sign, as a blessing in disguise. And it really didn't feel like it on that day or the week or so after that. But I took it as a blessing in disguise, and I was like, you know what, maybe perhaps it's time for change. I don't know, but the key is I'm open to the idea of it. So I had moved to Florida and taught down here, and that's when I started the medical school route, and it really opened up some doors. And when I look back, it was absolute perfection, absolute perfection. And it was just a reminder. It was just a reminder that sometimes what may be perceived as a worsening of my situation or anxiety is just to get us right back in alignment with what we're really meant to do. And if you approach things like that, even when the bad days come, which they're going to come to all of us, when the bad days come, you can have a plan of attack for that. And I think even a scenario now that I think about is of using all three of these is investing in the cryptocurrency market. I've been doing that for a while, and of course it's not going very well right now, and it was such a big, how do I react to that? What do I do? Do I react? And of course the answer is no. I shouldn't just overreact or make an impulsive choice to sell everything and the heck with this. It was more to take a step back, kind of analyze the situation. What's in my control and what's not. I don't control the markets. I don't control interest rates and all that kind of stuff. So, and then I said, well, how do I take this as a positive? Well, it made me kind of refocus. I told myself, if I had a couple million in the bank right now, what would I have probably done? I would probably be down in Key West somewhere. I would have probably bought a house in that Truman Annex, and not be doing what I'm doing right now, which is back to teaching, because it was a reminder of me having to reflect and say, what am I good at? What's something that the world needs that I can provide? And honestly, it's probably more of that teaching aspect. It's more of sharing that story and helping people with, not only the academic side of things, but more of the mental health side as well. It's teaching people how to deal with the anxiety that we're all going to have to experience and all have to go through. So that was just more of a recent situation that I had to use, and I'm glad I did, because it's just a reminder. And ever since making that decision to get back and doing more of these videos and education, I've had more interactions with others, and it makes me feel good. It gives me purpose. It gives me meaning. And that's perhaps something I wouldn't have had if things would have just went gangbusters on the investments and stuff like that. So I'm really happy that I did. So in summary, guys, 3 things. Let's overcome the anxiety. I just want you to not to react. I want you just to pause. I want you to assess the situation and say what's under my control and what's not. And then third, just understand the situation that arises, or whatever the choice that's made, it's really there just to kind of realign you with perhaps a greater meaning, greater purpose in your life, and you just got to trust the process. And I'm kind of living proof that it works. So, anyways, guys, those are my 3 things. That's my take.